to explore some of the correspondences and some of the interesting things that we get when we go through the sequence of the major arcana in a numeric sequence, but making a few changes. So we'll be going through the first card and the last card, comparing the two. But I'm going to make a few changes here. First of all, I'm going to remove the Fool card, and then I'm going to remove the quote-unquote Death card. The reason why I'm removing these two cards is because they have something quite unique about them. Not only are they visually similar, but the Fool card has a name title and no number, and of course the Death card has a number and no name. So these two cards are quite unique in the major arcana. That one has a name and no title, one has a name and no number, and one has a number and no name. So I'm going to remove those two cards for now, and then go through the sequence of taking the first card and the last card to see what we have. So first of all, we have the first card, the Magician, and the last card in the major arcana, which is the World. Now here we can see some similarities. We can see that we have some sort of idea of conjuration and manifestation. Here we can see the Magician is holding a wand in his hand, which obviously is symbolic of the suit of wands, and then on his table he's got the remaining three. He's got the knife, which is swords, the cup, and some coins. So we can see this also in the World card, where we can see the maiden surrounded by 4 creatures that represent the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. So we have the lion, which is Leo in the fixed zodiac, and Leo is fire sign, and obviously we can assume that it's related to the suit of batons. Then we have the eagle, which is an old symbol of Scorpio, and Scorpio is a water sign and corresponding to the suit of cups. Then we have the angel, or the man, and obviously the angel is corresponding to the suit of Aquarius, which is an air sign, believe it or not, and air signs we associate with the suit of swords. Then we have the bow, which represents Taurus, and of course earth, and the suit of coins. So matching, corresponding with the implied on the Magician's table and the wand in his hand. Also, if we look at the Magician, we can see that if we divide the card in half using the table as a dividing line, we can see the lower part being a very earthly realm. The table is fixed to the earth. He's standing on earth, a lot of earth around him, and above him is the air and the celestial, or the heavens. Oftentimes this card is associated with Mercury, and Mercury being a messenger, some sort of a conduit between the earth and the gods. And of course we can see in the World card we have the lower half being terrestrial animals, with the bow and the lion, very much terrestrial animals, and in the upper part we have the angel and the eagle, which obviously very celestial. The next cards in the sequence, we have the Popes, and the second last card in the sequence, we have the Judgment card. So here we get the idea of spirituality and reward. Or if we consider the Popes to be a heretical pope, we can look at the Judgment card as being getting what you deserve for being a heretic. And then the next cards in the sequence, we have the Empress and the Sun card. Here we have a very hermetic idea of the Empress being the archetypal feminine and the solar masculine of the Sun. And in Jungian terms, that's going to be the anima and the animus. The anima being the feminine part, and the animus being the masculine part. And if we look at the next sequence, we get something very similar. And his corresponding card, is the moon. So here again, we get the idea of the animus, the male aspect, and he is obviously missing his anima, the feminine aspect, the feminine part of his psyche. So these two sets of cards, very, very connected. The Empress with the sun, the solar sun, and the masculine archetype with the lunar feminine. The next cards in the sequence, we have the Pope, followed by the Star. Here we can see how the tarot mixes things up and gives us similarities and opposites. So first of all, we have the Pope, the leader of the spiritual tradition, and he's got in front of him two tonsured monks or priests about to receive his blessing. And we have the Star card where we have, in contrast to the fully clothed Pope, we have a naked woman. And she, like the Pope, is passing on her blessings in the form of her liquids from her jugs, pouring them down into the lake of the subconscious. The Pope's messages are very outward, and whereas the Star's message is very silent and more of an internal passing on. On either side of the Pope we can see two pillars, and on either side of the Star card we can see two trees that also frame her in a similar way. But there's another connection between these two cards. The very foundation of Christianity is predicated on the three magicians or three magi that were using the Star of Bethlehem to guide their way to find the baby Jesus, to anoint him. From that very act of the magicians, the three magi who used the Star of Bethlehem to find Jesus, that's pretty much the original opening story for Christianity, for which the Pope is representative of. And then if we come to the next two cards in the sequence, we have the Lover and the Tower card. Here we get the idea of love and war. We get the idea of the Lover making choices and the Tower card being the result of those choices. Also, we can look at this from Kabbalah point of view. If we take the traditional tree, the Kirshner tree that's often used in tarot, we can see that the tower would fit. First of all, the tower is representative of Mars, and we can see that the tower fits between Netzach and Hod. So Netzach obviously is the Venus, and Hod is Mercury. So we have the masculine, feminine, and linking the two. If, however, we compare the Mars card with the Luria tree, which is traditionally used in Hebrew or in Jewish mysticism, in Jewish Kabbalah, unlike the Kirshner tree, which is used in Hermetic Kabbalah. But if we look at the Luria tree, we can see that the Mars corresponds with the vertical pillar between Ketha and Tiphareth. And that's interesting because we get the idea of a tower, the longest vertical path on the Tree of Life. The Luria Tree of Life is actually corresponding to Mars. And with that idea, we have with the Tower card, we get some characters falling out, between one falling on the feminine side of the tree and the other one falling on the masculine side of the tree. So it's all about the eternal struggle to combine the anima and the animus, trying to get them together in a hermetic principle. Next, we have the Chariot and we have the Devil card. Now, there's a lot of similarities here. First of all, we can see that there's two very powerful figures. One of them is the king or the prince riding on the chariot. The other one is the devil, who's a very powerful figure too. But the difference is one is in motion, the other one is very stationary. So we have the chariot. It is being pulled by two horses, both tethered to the chariot, but it's a chariot of motion. Contrasted with the devil, who has two imps tied and bound to his anvil or whatever he has standing on. The chariot obviously suggests motion, and the devil card obviously is suggesting very stationary and very bound. Also, if we look at these cards, if we divide them in half, first of all we get the chariot. We can see that below the half of the card we can see is everything, his lower half is covered by the chariot, whereas from the devil card everything is exposed. He's completely naked and all his genitalia hanging out. So quite a contrast there. Also, if we look at the crown, the headgear, we have the king who's wearing a crown that's opened up to the heavens, receptive to the heaven, as a kingly crown should be, contrasted to the devil who has a similar type of crown, but his one is closed, so he's not receptive to the heavens at all. Even we could consider that the chariot is a outdoor scene, and the devil being inside a cave or inside the pits of hell, Hades. One is extremely out in the open, other one is extremely hidden in the depths of the earth. The next two cards we get in the sequence, we get the Justice card and we get Temperance. Very obvious connection here. Here we got the idea of two scales that balance and contrasted compared with the Temperance card, who has two jugs. So it's more about balance and modulation or moderation. And of course we can see very similar ideas of behind the Justice card, which looks like angel wings, and obviously angel wings. So some similarities between the two, but this is pretty obvious connection. The next two cards, we have the Hermit and the Hanged Man. Again, very obvious connection here. We see the ideas of spirituality, of searching. The Hermit is outwardly searching, and the Hanged Man is doing inner searching. Again, very similar theme. The next two cards that we have, and we got the Wheel of Fortune and the Force card, the Strength. So here we have the idea of motion, things going up and down, things constantly changing, and we have the idea of inner strength and fighting over your animalistic desires, which is a continuous up and down battle, and it never seems to end. Given all the constant wars and stuff, we always have this idea of our animal side always coming out, and the wheels of time and wheels of change is constantly in motion. Nothing ever changes in that regard. And then getting to the two cards that we removed from the deck. So we have the Fool with no number and the quote-unquote Death card with no name. Again, we can see very similar visual, a similarity between the two. They're both holding a stick. They both seem to be marching forward, walking forward in steady pace. But in this case, it's probably about beginnings and endings. Beginning being the Fool on starting his journey into the wild unknown, and the Death card being the cessation or the stopping of that. Of course, the Death card is obviously going to be starting a new cycle, but it's about starting a journey and ending a journey. One is fully clothed, and in some decks the Fool card actually has some naked genitalia sticking out again. But in the Death card, we can see someone who's pretty much naked, very flesh colored, contrast between clothing on, clothing off, and starting a journey and ending a journey. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. Just an idea. It's some idea that I got with putting these cards out on the floor and checking them out. If you have any ideas or any other thoughts on this, please feel free to let me know.